That's why Jennifer keeps me around. She will always look better than I do. Ben Affleck had control of everything since the glory of Good Will Hunting. Riches, fame, and power that would make Hollywood bow down. But the more attention that was paid to him, the less happy he became. He was in relationships with beautiful women like Gwyneth Paltrow and Jennifer Garner. But all they left him were wounds and silences filled with sadness. Ben didn't think that fate had finally opened a beautiful door in his life until he got back together with Jennifer Lopez in 2021. She was his last true love, the person who would be with him through all the bad times. Ben loved her with all of his heart and soul and decided almost right away to marry her. But he didn't think Jennifer Lopez would cheat on him with another man, which hurt his trust even more. What a mess Ben is in right now. His sadness is terrible. He feels lonely all the time, like a ghost following him around. Who is Ben Affleck's real love in the end? How much did he pay for love and fame? Let's go on a rough ride through love and the people who made him the man he is now. Let's start with the first part of Ben Affleck's heart. His sweet but sad first love. The person who gave him fears, doubts, and a strong need to be loved that stayed with him for years. Ben Affleck was still a young man with. They had eager eyes and a heart full of love. He met Cheyenne Rothman at a camp in Vermont one summer. It was like a soft breeze came into his life. She wasn't very pretty, she was just a normal girl with bright eyes and a shy smile. For Ben, though, she was a whole new world and a part of youth he had never known. For 7 years, from the time they were teens until they were in their first year of college, Ben and Cheyenne lived their lives together. It was the calmest time in Ben's life, when love was still pure and not affected by fame or stress. Time never stops, though. Cheyenne went to school. Ben started to look for acting jobs, go on auditions, and read scripts. Slowly, his Hollywood dream came true. Between people, places, and things, distance slowly made holes that words couldn't fill. Lack of long hugs and deeply understood looks gave way to rushed phone calls, summer afternoons apart, and occasional letters. He has a clear memory of Cheyenne going with him to the opening of his first movie. It was like she wanted to freeze the moment before everything changed as she stood there. Ben looked at her and felt calmed, but he also knew that things would change over the next few days. The cameras, the lights, and the cheers were all taking his attention away from the peaceful world that Cheyenne stood for. They broke up in the summer of 1997. Their silence showed that they knew in their hearts they couldn't keep going in the same direction. Ben knew that a new job opportunity was coming up. He would have to accept losing the best part of his youth in order to move on. His first love. While he chose the bright lights of chance, roles, and the goals he had long sought, Cheyenne chose peace in her own life. Ben Affleck's first love, Cheyenne Rothman, was still a quiet but deep wound in his heart. It was a sweet but unfinished story. It made him feel empty inside, and the happiness of success could never fill that void. When people talk about his first love, they can see a hole in him. Through pain and sorrow, he became the man he is today. Where love never had a chance to fill the void. The stress of his job made him feel even more alone. Ben became distant, guarded, and fragile as the stage lights and applause pulled him forward. He was a man who had to hide his feelings to survive the storm of fame. And Ben Affleck met Gwyneth Paltrow in the middle of that storm. Ben Affleck moved into a new world in the late 1990s, where Hollywood lights both reflected and hid things. At that time, Gwyneth Paltrow stood out like a cool breeze in the middle of all the chaos. She was smart, beautiful, and full of life. They met at a party with lots of laughter, champagne, and bright lights, and they felt an instant bond that was hard to describe. Ben was fascinated by her more than just her stunning beauty. She also had a grace and wit that he had never seen before. Their relationship grew very quickly. In a world full of glitz and temptation, two young, bright, and driven people met. It felt like they were the only ones in the room when they were at events and making movies together. But Hollywood. It was also a place of stress, scrutiny, and never-ending work. Long nights of shooting, endless parties, and all the attention from the public slowly broke down the peace in their love. Ben noticed that even when they were having a good time, they were always worried about the future. Personal problems, drinking, gaming, and the desire for freedom outside of love caused cracks that could not be fixed. They broke up and got back together several times before ending things for good around the year 2000. They didn't say anything mean or accusatory, they just knew that they wanted a different life. Ben felt a deep emptiness that lights, praise, or success could not fill as he watched Gwyneth walk away. Ben threw himself into work as a way to flee after his breakup with Gwyneth. But Hollywood isn't a safe place, especially since Giggly, the movie he made with Jennifer Lopez, got bad reviews and hurt his image. As people made fun of and judged him, he felt like he was drowning in a wave of mean criticism that made him feel even more alone and made him question himself. Even with everything going wrong, Ben still fell in love quickly. He did this not because he was naive, but because he needed to calm his heart and find a light that showed the past does not determine the future. Ben didn't really feel something he hadn't felt since he was a child until Jennifer Garner came into his life. Peace and safety that made his broken heart want to lean in and let go. In 2001, on the Pearl Harbor set, he saw Jennifer wearing her white nurse's outfit. Her soft brown hair was falling over her shoulder, and her smile at a fake patient was like a beam of light. Through the fog. Ben stopped moving for a moment, as if the busy world around him went away. He was the next big thing. She only had a few lines. Still, that small, pure smile stuck in his mind like a faint promise of what would happen. He wouldn't fully understand this promise for a long time. They met again in the training room for Daredevil 2 years later, as fate would have it. In a tight red rubber suit, Ben was trying to hold together a man who was breaking inside. Jennifer spins sharply and elegantly in her size 8 shoes, like a deadly dance. They started to really talk while they were practicing, even though they were sweating and out of breath. They threw punches like they were angry at life. Jennifer about how hard her breakup is. Ben about how his relationship fell apart in front of the media. They laughed, but it was the laughter of two hurt people who saw each other in the chaos of Hollywood. And Ben didn't want to drink that night when he drove Jennifer home. It had been months since he hadn't, though. A small but strong sign that his heart was temporarily safe from the storm. In the summer of 2004, they were very close and their love grew. Ben took Jennifer to Fenway Park, which was still home to the Boston boy in him. He gave her his too big t-shirt, and she wore a cap pulled low over her bright eyes. Ben gave her a big hug and yelled like a child when the Red Sox won. Not the Oscar-winning actor or the Bennifer from the tabloids, but just Ben, a shy guy who was falling in love. Jennifer looked at him with soft eyes that seemed to accept even the worst parts of him. It was like she could see all of his wounds and still chose to stay with him and love him. On June 29, 2005, Ben knelt down in front of Jennifer on a small island in the Caribbean at sunset. His hand was shaking so badly that he dropped the ring box, and his heart felt like it was going to burst. The ring wasn't fancy or big, but his words were full of love. "I won't give you the whole world, but I will love and protect you with all of it." Jennifer broke down in tears and hugged him so tightly that they both fell to the warm sand. The next morning, before dawn had fully broken, they got married. Jennifer later said it was the best day of her life. She was so happy she could hardly breathe. Then Violet was born in December 2005. She was tiny and red, and she grabbed Ben's finger like she was holding on to his whole life. He stood by the hospital bed, choked up like a child who had just found a reason to live. "I won't be like my father. I promise," he whispered, tears falling onto his daughter's cheek. At that moment, he really believed he could keep that promise. But he never stopped drinking. He drank on long nights of filming, at parties that seemed harmless, and when he watched his family laugh while a mean voice played in his mind. Jennifer saw everything, the bottles hidden in the basement, his red eyes every morning, and the fake smiles he put on when the kids asked, "Daddy, are you tired?" She didn't blame him or get mad. Instead, she held his hand, drove him to rehab, cried quietly, and forced a smile. "You have to get better for the kids, for me, for yourself." But sometimes, even the most beautiful love can't beat the darkness that grew from childhood. On June 30, 2015, one day after their 10th anniversary, they sat on their familiar sofa and wrote their separation statement while Jennifer cried without making a sound. As Ben held her, his voice was so choked that he almost couldn't say anything. "Thank you for staying so long. At that moment, they didn't blame or resent each other, they just hurt deeply because they knew their love had never gone away. It just wasn't strong enough to save him from the demons inside him. As a shaking boy in a house that smelled like alcohol, it seemed like the tragedy had reached its peak with his drinking. But no, fate seemed set on breaking Ben's heart again. While he and Jennifer Garner were having trouble in their marriage, Christine Yuzunian's name came up like a cold blade. The young nanny with her sweet everyday smile was suddenly surrounded by suspicion, and pictures of her sitting on Ben's lap on A. The media turned their lives into a public trial where everyone judged, condemned, and crushed all three people caught in the storm. Christine, who had been taking care of innocent children, became the other woman everyone looked at. Some said she thought there was something real between her and Ben, that she had dreamed of another future, another life. Others said she was just taking advantage of a man who was weak from alcoholism and emotional wounds. The truth, like a damp shadow, stayed hidden. All that was left were rumors, like arrows shot into Ben and Garner's dying marriage. Christine was fired, carrying a stain she didn't know was real or not, but that she would never fully wash away. 3 years later, when the divorce was finalized with a signature, Ben sat alone in his car and broke down in tears. The paparazzi caught the moment as if they were grabbing his raw, scratched soul. "It was the biggest failure of my life," he said. His words were not excuses from a flawed man, they were the breathless confession of someone who destroyed the only place he had ever felt safe. He cried for his children who had to live between two homes. He cried for mornings when he woke up with a heavy head and his kids' confused eyes. He cried because he had become the man he had feared most as a child, the absent father. From then on, depression became a night that choked his chest every night. There were only dim yellow lights and old pictures left in the big house where his kids used to laugh. Some days Ben looked in the mirror and didn't recognize himself. Some nights he sat on the floor with his head in his hands, wondering if things might have been different if he had been stronger and not let alcohol drag him down so far. Amid the collapse, in the silent sobs of a man with a torn heart, there remained a faint light, a yearning to be loved, forgiven, embraced, and told he wasn't a mistake. Every time he fell, he got back up. Shaking and tired, Ben always ran toward love with the desperation of someone clinging to the last rock before drowning in his own ocean. He didn't just want someone to be there with him, he wanted arms warm enough to pull him out of the depths he had created for himself. In the chaos of those months, when Ben's heart was still full of unhealed wounds, fate pushed Ana de Armas toward him. In late 2019, he met Ana on the set of the dark psychological thriller Deep Water. He saw more than a co-star, he saw eyes as deep as oceans, a smile as soft as morning light, and a warmth that made his long-hardened heart tremble like it wanted to live again. He didn't say it, but he knew that Ana's arrival would change something inside him. When they started dating on March 20th, Tassanwani, the world was shutting down because of the pandemic. While Ben's heart was opening for the first time in a long time, the chaos outside made everything quiet and slow, and it was in that rare stillness that he found Ana in a more complete way. Los Angeles was quiet like a frozen city, and he lived strangely peaceful days. Walking dogs with her, talking under. Small things that made him laugh were like medicine for his broken heart. When Ana met his kids, Ben stood in the corner and watched as if he was holding his breath. He saw how kind she was to them and how much respect she showed them. At that moment, his heart tightened with both hope and fear. He worried about his kids, whose souls were already hurt by their parents' breakup, and he worried about Ana, who was a fragile light stepping into his dark life. But he also felt a rare joy. They felt like they had a family again, even if it was only for a short time. The trips they took together, the breakfasts they shared, and the nights they laid together listening to each other breathe became memories so beautiful that he was afraid to touch them for fear they would break. Ana made him laugh at the smallest things and believed that even a flawed and broken man like him could be loved gently. To Ben, Ana was more than just a lover, she was a quiet sky of peace he thought he would never have again. But at the end of 2020, the truth started to slowly emerge, like cracks in glass. Their lifestyles, habits, and hopes for the future began to break them apart. Every conversation about the future felt like a rope tightening around his heart, squeezing out every beating heartbeat. When they broke up in January 2021, Ben felt like a piece of him had been torn away. It wasn't a loud, angry, or betrayal-based separation, it was painful in a quiet, smoldering way, like a cut so deep it doesn't bleed but leaves you breathless. He thought back to the past year and remembered her smile, her hand, and his. The sound of their footsteps walking side by side had become memories so sharp they could cut his heart every night. After the breakup, Ben often walked down empty streets with his head lowered as if he were contemplating death. He looked for something he dropped but knew he would never find it again. What if he had tried a little harder, he thought. What if he was stronger? What if he wasn't so scared of what might happen? But every question made him feel the same pain. He had lost her not because he was careless, but because there were two beautiful lines that would never cross. Even after many years of other heartaches and changes, Ben would still think of Anna sometimes, like remembering a beautiful dream that fate had snatched away. He knew that she had brought a part of him to life, a part that was gentle, warm, and longing to love, that he had not been brave or lucky enough to marry. The woman who had once made him happy. Suddenly, Jennifer Lopez came back into Ben's life like a punch to the chest. It was so strong that it left him gasping for air. She was the woman he never really had and never really let go of in his heart. She was a sweet and painful wound that he thought he had buried under the dust of time. Ben never told anyone this, but Jennifer Lopez was the unfinished love that had been haunting him for 20 years. The first time Ben saw Jennifer walk into the script reading room for Giggly at the end of 2001, her smile burst like an explosion of light. She was wearing a tight red dress, and the light reflecting off her brown hair made Ben freeze for a moment. He was still young, proud, and full of arrogance, but in front of Jennifer, he was just a man whose heart was racing like a teenage boy in love. She was married, and he was just a polite co-worker, but every time she looked at him, he felt naked, like she could see the vulnerability he hid behind his cold face. When Jennifer got divorced in the summer of 2002, they met again, like two souls who had been emotionally deserted for years. Ben took Jennifer to Boston, to the small kitchen where his mother had cooked him simple meals. He made pasta. She opened the wine, and they laughed and held each other on the couch as if the outside world didn't exist. Jennifer said he made her feel truly seen, and Ben felt like he was living in a dream, wrapped in laughter and golden sunset light. They went everywhere together, holding hands on the street, kissing under the Malibu sun, wearing matching outfits like two fools madly in love. The media made fun of them by calling them Benifer, but Ben didn't care. He thought he loved the woman he would marry. Ben knelt with the famous pink diamond ring, and Jennifer cried uncontrollably and threw her arms around him. They were so perfect that it scared them both. But the happier they got, the more people watched them. The paparazzi followed them around, and the press made fun of their every move, word, and gesture. The pressure built up until they could barely breathe. Days before the wedding, Ben held Jennifer in a dark room and whispered, "I don't want you to live in this nightmare." Then they called off the wedding, and in January 2004, they broke up. It wasn't because they stopped loving each other, but because the world was too heavy for their love to bear. Jennifer called it her worst heartbreak. As the years went by, each building their own lives, getting married, divorcing, and suffering in their own ways. But in 2021, when Ben was sitting in his big but cold house, depressed and lonely after his breakup with Anna, fate struck again. They started texting, and one simple message pulled his soul out of the darkness. "I still keep your letters," Ben said on a tired Los Angeles afternoon. "I kept everything, too." In May 2021, they met again, and with one look, 20 years of heartbreak seemed like they had never happened. They went to Montana, sat by a campfire, hands entwined, and cried like two kids who had found each other after getting lost in life's chaos. Ben said in a shaking voice, "This time I won't let you go." Jennifer kissed him, her eyes burning with hot tears. "I've waited for you for so long." Their second love grew, becoming mature, gentle, and fierce at the same time. Ben learned Spanish to talk to Max and Emma. Jennifer held Violet and Serafina's hands at the park like a second mother, even though every mispronounced word made the whole house laugh. They secretly got married in Las Vegas under dim neon lights. Jennifer wore a simple white dress that was stunning in its simplicity, and Ben looked at her like life had come true. And Ben threw himself into love like a man trying to swim against a huge flood. He planned fancy dates and expensive gifts to make everything perfect. To feel like he earned a second chance, not to show off. But the more he tried, the more he felt like a man who was worn out from battle and fighting while shaking because he was afraid of failing again. When he smiled at Jennifer in public, it was like joy slipped through his fingers as soon as he touched her. During their honeymoon in Italy, Ben would sometimes look into his cold coffee on a hotel patio with only the sound of waves hitting the rocks for company. He would wonder if he was living his own life or just playing a part that everyone else thought he should play. He smiled back at Jennifer, who was glowing next to him. But there was a quiet storm in his eyes, and he wasn't sure what to call his tiredness. That storm finally broke in the summer of 2023. Ben felt like he was taken back to 2002 when Jennifer talked about her new record, her new documentary, and how his old letters would be turned into a book. Back then, every secret and feeling he had was harshly shown on camera. He sat in front of the trailer for the program with a pale face. It was such a small voice that he almost didn't say anything. "I don't want the world to read what I wrote to you in my darkest moments," he said. Jennifer frowned slightly, hurt, not being able to understand his deepest fear, the fear of being torn open again. The way Jennifer talked about their love, too big, too public, and too loud, made Ben realize he had gone too far into a world he didn't belong in. He needed quiet like oxygen while Jennifer breathed through the spotlight. Their hearts no longer beat in sync, even though they tried to hold on with awkward hugs, tired smiles, and silent movie nights that neither of them remembered afterward. Ben started to lose himself in the long nights, and Jennifer stayed shining in the light, trying to save their dying love with promises, projects, and memories told 1,000 times. Ben listened, but each time he felt his heart tighten, as if love was becoming a gentle but impossible trap. By April 2024, when they decided to live apart, Ben didn't feel angry, he didn't feel begging, and he didn't feel hopeless. He just stopped talking. Jennifer turned away the day she filed for divorce because of the cold, heavy silence. On their wedding anniversary, Ben read the words "irreconcilable differences" and pressed his lips together as if letting go would break his heart into 1,000 pieces. He didn't fight it because he knew that holding on would hurt them both more. During their last meeting at the lawyer's office, they held each other for a long time. There was no passion, no promises. They were just two people who had once loved each other deeply and were now standing in front of the ashes of a beautiful dream. Ben whispered, his voice breaking, "Thank you for coming back." Jennifer said yes, and tears fell on his face. Rain fell on her shoulder late at night. "I don't regret it," she said. "I'm just sad." The most painful truth was that Ben had 20 years to figure out who she was before trying again, but he still lied to himself about being the partner Jennifer needed. It wasn't Jennifer who lied to him, it was Ben who lied to himself. Even when Ben asked Jennifer to be less public, to appear less, to share less, and to be less herself, she tried. But that was like asking the sun to stop shining, she couldn't change at her core. What Ben thought was adaptability was just an illusion. He thought he could ask Jennifer to become someone else through love, but he was completely wrong. They've been careful when they talk since the divorce, but the lessons they learned are different. Ben stresses respect, obviously, because he knows the breakup is going to happen. Jennifer, as always, lives fully and continues her journey. After walking out of the wreckage of his marriage to Jennifer Lopez, like a survivor of a big storm, Ben stayed trapped in the empty aftermath. The pain of divorce clung to him like a heavy fog, and even though he never said it out loud, everyone could see that a part of his heart had fallen into the pit of loss. He turned to work to stay busy, but loneliness crept into every quiet moment between scenes. When the cameras stopped and the lights went down, Ben sat alone with bloodshot eyes. He drank again on his worst days, an old habit he thought he had buried a long time ago. One drink, then two, until the pain went away. But the next morning, he felt even worse, and he told himself, "I can't go back to that path." His 3 children were the only reason he didn't lose himself entirely. Every video call, he forced a smile, forced his voice not to shake. Violet asked, "Are you okay, Dad?" To which he simply answered, "I'm fine." Just one phrase, but there were 1,000 cracks inside him. They were the anchor that kept him sane and reminded him there were still things that needed to be done. Sometimes alcohol tempted him, whispering sweet promises of numbness. And when he was weak, Ben gave in and let himself drift into the drunkenness. But every time, he hated himself because he knew it could ruin everything he'd worked so hard to rebuild over the years, his sobriety, his stability, and his image as a father who was trying to be better every day. He shook in front of the half-finished glass and whispered, "No, I can't go back." He went back to therapy slowly, carefully, and with a lot of fear. Each session felt like removing thick layers from a hurt heart. He learned to accept that he was hurt and to deal with loneliness instead of drinking. Healing wasn't romantic, it was messy and painful, but it was the only thing that could pull him out of the darkness. In 2025, Ben went back to acting in the action drama film The Accountant 2, which was the follow-up to the popular The Accountant. He also kept running his own production company, stressing that his main goal now was to work while still having time for his kids. He said that directing had taken too much time, making him regret missing out on valuable years with them. When it came to love, Ben remained open but cautious. He didn't rush into big relationships, but instead opted for slow, comfortable ones based on trust and empathy. Ben Affleck learned to slow down, balance work and family, take care of himself physically and mentally, and limit media pressure as much as possible. He realized that happiness isn't found in fame or fiery love, but in everyday moments, warm meals, and simple smiles with the people he loves. Looking back, Ben's journey was full of sadness and tragedy, but also lessons. Despite pain and guilt, he never stopped searching, diving into relationships like he was looking for salvation. He leaves us a message that is both fragile and strong. Love is precious, but also a challenge, and failing is sometimes how we learn to grow. When we look at his life, we see both loneliness and deep longing. We wonder, will he ever truly find peace, or will he keep searching through unfinished loves? Please share your thoughts below. Ben Affleck's story isn't just about a Hollywood star, it's about all of us: love, failure, regret, and hope. If you feel moved by his journey, please subscribe to our channel to see more everyday stories full of emotion, learning to cherish and love more every day.